So here is the cowling all done and painted with some Tamiya spray paint aluminum, I think shiny or gloss aluminum or something. Turned out really nice. Again, it's paper, but it looks like a piece of metal or a plastic cowling. Looks just as good. Um, and that's cool. I also, with the engine, I fixed it so that I um, made it correct. So in other words, uh, the um, the little manifold stuff is now in the front, the brass things. I put them in the front now. And I also put on the push rods in the front. So now this engine is a much closer approximation to what was on this airplane. So the engine that comes with the kit is actually a different Gnome rotary from a Newport 16, not from Newport 11. So I'm glad I fixed that because I might even put some spark plug wires in there too. But anyway, this is how the little cowling is going to fit, and it's going to look really, really cool. So all I do now is glue this on. There's only the very top part is what needs glue because it goes on to the bulkhead back there. Because the very edges of near the bottom are going to be there's an extra piece of paper that's going to go on those cheeks because this whole thing is bigger than the fuselage. It's wider than the fuselage, but we'll end up putting these little cheek pieces on those sides, and that'll clean it up, just like in the real McCoy. But this just takes a little bit of time. Wasn't hard at all because it fit nice, fit like a glove, and there's enough purchase on the bulkhead that there's a lot of place to dry the glue. And all I'm doing is eyeballing it, making sure it's even, making sure the horseshoe isn't crooked. I'm looking at it from the front, from the side, just making sure everything looks good. And once it's good, just let it sit there and dry. And it looks really cool with the cowling and the engine there. I also, by the way, I'm pointing out, I edge painted the V-struts, so they're not white paper anymore. But that was a huge thing that's out of the way, and the cowling was not hard to finish. And by the way, I didn't add one little piece, I added some putty. But all this is a bunch of sanding and primer, probably 6 or 7 coats of primer with sanding in between, and it came out nice and smooth. So it looks really nice. I'm glad I did that. To me, it just looks better than the paper. Um, then I decided to start making the propeller, and the title. Oh, these are the little cheek pieces. Those pieces right there. I painted them aluminum, and sort of started to shape them with a little bit of a curve. And I'm just going to show you how they fit. I actually put them on off camera later, but I'm just going to show you where they fit. There's a line, a black line right there by the side of the cowling on the fuselage, and you can see it's supposed to line up on that line piece, and then the rounded part that's curved then fits up against the rear of the cowling just like that. So that's how it's going to look. The only problem is when I put it in, it turns out that it doesn't have an opening at the bottom, which it should, but I'm okay with that. So now the propeller is the next thing to make, and I started on a little bit of a quest here. We're down a rabbit hole. This is the propeller that came with the kit, and so I started with the hub, and I'm poking a hole where there's a little brass wire that goes through that kind of holds the blades in place and gives them a little bit of structure. So the piece I'm working with is just the hub itself. It's going to be rolled into a cylinder, but these 2 little holes, I'm just make sure that my brass will go into them. So I poked them in, made sure. There's a little tab that is glued on, just like we've done with various kinds of formers and things with other airplanes. And then I'm going to roll that piece, and it'll go around and glue it together, and you'll have your cylinder, which is the initial part of your hub. This is a very typical propeller, how propellers are made in a lot of these World War I airplanes. It's rather simple, and it can be very effective, and this one isn't bad. But I'll show you what I do later at the end of this. So I'm rolling that to try to get a nice cylinder. It has good markings on where the prop blades end up going. So I rolled that, and then I took a smaller diameter piece, which happens to be this little poker thing I use, and roll that around to get it even finer. so that it rolls. And again, I tend to roll these pieces of paper so that they're actually kind of over rolled, because then they fit together pretty nice. Add a little bit of glue onto the tab, and then just bring the side piece together, line it up, and squeeze it shut with your tweezers, your forceps, as they say at work. And that's the first part. Then we're going to put a front cap and a back cap on, and then we'll work on the blades. And I'm showing you this because if you end up wanting to use this kind of propeller, it does work, and it'll look pretty good once it's cleaned up. But I'm not sure if we're going to use it or not. Now, I'm rolling this with the brush handle inside just to make sure it's actually round, because it's got that tab in there, and the tab is kind of thick paper, and so it actually leaves like a little ridge on the outside. So I'm trying to make sure it actually turns round, and kind of press it so that it does. But that looks pretty good. There's a nice round initial component. So now all I got to do is put the front and the back on. Now there I'm pointing out that there's an actual handedness to or a side. So you have to make sure the propeller is airfoiled shape and the rounded part of the airfoil faces forward. So this hub is the forward hub. That's the one that would have all the screws and the bolts and stuff and the nuts to hold the propeller on. So that goes on that end, which makes sense. And then the other side, that little tiny one there, looks like a donut, that's going to go on the opposite side. And then the hub will be completed. So there it is with glue, and I'm just dropping that on, gluing it shut, making sure it's straight, and fit very well. And I don't know if it's supposed to be rolled inside or not, but when I cut it, it seemed to fit just fine on the outside like this. So that's what I did. Then I stuck my little brass through the holes, and believe it or not, I thought it would be a nightmare to actually get this to fish through, but this is in real time, and it took me just a few seconds. And I thought, here we go, it's going to be an expedition to try to get that in the other hole. And all of a sudden, bam, it went right in, no problem. So then I have that in there, and that's going to be, like I said, the basis of where the prop blades go. And then this is a tiny little hub piece that was rolled very skinny, and a piece of paper that was rolled into just a tiny little jelly roll, and then that just gets put with some glue right on the very tip, and then ultimately I hit it with a little bit of gray marker to sort of camouflage it. But that just gives you a little bit of more three-dimensionality to that front and gives it a little something extra, so that's good. But then the hub is all done, and it's waiting for the prop blades, which you can see are back there on the table. So to start these, what I do is they're supposed to be, not flat. So I roll them at first, each one of them, and I try to get them to sort of be an airfoil shape. And what I end up doing is gluing the very edges to each other of each blade, wanting to, again, make sure I don't have flat sides. You don't want it to be completely flat like a flat piece of paper. Sandwiched. You want it to sort of just be glued around the edges, and then leave the base open, because that's what you're going to put over the brass, and then glue it to those, and then glue the base pieces to the hubs. But this is just a matter of rolling these each in turn, and I just speed it up because it's the same thing. And then I start to put a little glue. I test them. Then I put a little bit of glue on the very edge all the way around, and then I start just very carefully overlaying the model. Again, the kit is drawn very well, so the parts, if you cut them out carefully, fit very well. There's no overlap, or you don't see it. If you do it right, it fits really beautifully. But I just put this on very carefully on the very edge. I don't want to get glue into the center, because I don't want it to start to sandwich and become just a fused piece of thick paper, because this is supposed to be wood that was spoke. We had a spoke shave on it, and got it all nice and airfoiled and everything. So I put this on. I make sure it's the right way, and I start just sort of tacking it down on the very edges, making sure the tip is even. And then once the tip is even, and I'm very carefully touching this, I'm barely touching it at all actually, because the glue grabs very well and it starts to actually make the whole blade. And then you can take tweezers and stuff and squeeze little parts, but you don't want to go crazy. The white part on the edges will be painted and or colored with a marker, but right now I thought let's just get this started. I can go back later and do that, but you can see in the tip it's still open, and that's because the brass is going to have to go in there. But now all I'm doing is making dang sure that everything is simpatico. Everything's starting to glue, and here I'm squeezing, but I'm squeezing the very edge, like I'm overlapping those tweezers with a lot of air. It is not. I'm not just squeezing down willy-nilly on that paper, and I'm doing it very delicately too, because again, you want to sort of have this be puffy. You want it to have a volume to it. You don't want it to be 2D. But once you got it together, you can see where the blade is supposed to go, and it's supposed to have an angle of attack towards the wing or towards the wind, and that's about where it would go in this case. The only thing is, I think, see that line there? I think that's supposed to be in the rear. So I have a feeling that I actually sandwiched these pieces incorrectly. I'm not that worried about it, but I have a feeling that is supposed to be on those two are supposed to be on the same side, but they're not. One you can see, and then the other one's on the other side. But I'm just test fitting this to see how it's going to look, and you can see with the curved out edge, it should fit at an angle about like that. And you can also twist the blades a little bit at the tip to make them look more like an air screw, like a helix. But the edge looks good. The tips, I'm thinking, looks like what I've seen in actual pictures of the airplane. And what I do is I add a little bit of glue. Well, it looks like a lot of little bit of glue to the brass, and then I add some to the base of the blade so that it's going to fit and go. And then any extra comes off easily with a little brush, so that's fine. But I slide that little guy in, and the length of the brass, by the way, is on the kit. It's a pattern I followed, and it fit very well. And you can see there's a lot of excess glue, but that's easy to take off with a brush. And I remove that, and it'll dry, and it'll be plenty strong even with just that white glue. This doesn't need to hold on like crazy. And then I'm just making sure that it is at the right angle at the base of the hub. And then you just basically do the same thing to the other side once you're satisfied. Put more glue on that side, more glue on its base, and then slide it in. And just make sure that your prop blades, when you look at them, are sort of have the opposite helix to them, like the real airplane, so that when the propeller spins, it'll bite into the air and then push the air, I guess, to the back and give you some propulsion. So the thing I don't like about these kind of propellers, this one actually turned out okay. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm going to use it or not. But when you put them together, they always look a little ratty at the hub. At least they do for me. They don't look that wonderful. Because it's really hard to cut them just exactly. It gives an impression, and again, for a paper model sitting on the shelf with everything else, especially if you clean up the edges, that's probably going to be more than sufficient. It's the right size and everything, right diameter. So really, I shouldn't be so picky about it. But that's the general prop that came with it. And again, what I'll do once it dries is twist things. The tips, twist them so that it'll twist it like that, because the edge should be, at the base of the hub is a steep helix, and at the edge it kind of goes more to the oncoming air. But that's the basic prop, and then just needs to be touched up. Now, there it is, and it's okay. And I've touched it up a little bit. It's not bad. However, I built a model, I built a model from another designer, and you see that piece that's cut out? This is a beautiful kit, by the way. This is another Newport. But see that those two weird shapes? Those are actually form a propeller blade, propellers. I've never seen things done that way until I built one from this fella. I made a real neat one for his spad, and you can see what happens is there it is cut out flat, but you basically rotate it around, and then that middle is going to form an open circle. And you fold the other one around and twist it like a twist tie, and that will form a circle. And then you basically glue the blades together. It's very persnickety to do, but if you do it right, you end up with like the best propeller blade that money can buy made out of paper. I mean, it's naturally twisted. There's no gaps or things in it. Um, it's pretty cool. In this particular one, where I'm trying to show you how I did it, it's not easy to show. But again, I'm trying to show you that you twist it, and when you twist it around, and I also kind of give it a little airfoil. You got to figure out how it has to go together. It's not intuitive, at least to me. But once you start putting it together, you can see that you're trying to roll these things around and twist them against each other to make a round opening in the hub. Then it's genius. It's a really cool way to make a propeller. I've never seen a propeller made this way, except for this particular designer. And the tips are not the right shape, so it's probably not the right kind of propeller that have been used for this airplane. But what I'm trying to do is see if I make this one, I'm going to compare the two and then decide what I want to do. Now here I put this on, but I'm putting it on the wrong way. These have got to match up. See, they got to match up, have the same shape, and I didn't do that. So anyway, you put this on much like the previous one by just starting to add some some glue to the very tip, and get rid of cat fur that gets in there, and line it up and do the same thing. Start at the very edges and just slowly work your way to the hub. And it's a lot of working and delicately tweaking things with your fingers. I'm barely holding on to this thing. I'm barely touching it. And I'm trying to make the glue do the work. Because once the glue starts to hold, you've got a pretty good, it's going to stay. And the paper is there and it's going to dry. But the weird part about this kind of propeller is it doesn't, like I said, to me, it's very counterintuitive of how it's supposed to go together. But you can see I'm kind of rolling it around and I'm testing it. And at this point, I'm kind of going, oh, this is how it's supposed to go. So I start to add a little bit more glue around the edges just as I go, just sort of slowly moving up to the hub. So I got a little bit more on this side, and then I start doing the other tip on the other side of the propeller, or the other propeller tip out there. And as you do this and you twist, you start to understand that this helical piece will come together and again form a center, prop bus, sort of prop hub, where a front and a back will actually go. I'm doing the same thing here. I'm very carefully gluing the very edges, as edgy as I can get, as far away again from sandwiching something as I possibly can. Just trying to get the very edges to start to dry. And this seems like such a nuisance, but if you do it right, as I said, the propeller is really a neat way to make a World War I era wooden-looking propeller out of paper. And it's something I never would have thought of, because I've only ever made them like the previous one, where you just have two blades, and you just glue them to the edge of a round hub, of a cylindrical hub. Never have they done this one, only once before. And here I'm still twisting, and see how when you twist, see how the middle is kind of coming together? It's hard to show you. You have to be there. But I'm trying to shape it in such a way so that middle is going to be a circle. If it's a circle, then you know you've done it right. And initially it's oblong. It's almost like an oval. But as you start to put it together and glue it, you can sort of force it into the right shape. But you can already see it starting to twist around. And I'm just playing with it. I know this doesn't make for a real titillating video, but I'm also trying to show you kind of what what it takes. Here I'm trying to make sure that the hub is still open, and I'm trying to make sure that all those little edges, again, are gluing and drying. Because basically I worked on one side, got it glued up, and then went over to the other side. And if you glue them together the way they look there, you automatically sort of make the right helix position, and you automatically make the hub. And you'll see at the very end, and I'll be curious if anybody, all four people that watch these videos, if anybody, what do they think of this propeller? Because I'm not sure which one I'm going to actually put on the airplane yet. The previous one's easier to make, but I like the look of this one, at least in design. This particular one that I'm trying to put together, not sure it did such a great job. I might have to try another one and see if I do it a second time. Maybe I'll make it look a little better. But the one is kind of ready to go. Excuse me. And so now it's time to put the other blade on there. And same thing, match up, let it dry, barely hit it with your fingers, barely touch it, squeeze it, and gentle is the watchword. The gentler you are, I think, the better it'll be. And all the time as you're doing this, you're trying to envision what that center is going to look like. And you can kind of see there's that middle. And as this starts to twist around, every time I do it, it starts to look a little bit better. It is definitely not magic, though. And in my case, the hub that came with the piece I was using to me was too small. I had to make a bigger hub. But anyway, this is just more gluing, edge gluing. I probably should have cut all this out. But again, I'm trying to show you what you have to do. You can fast forward to the end if you want, and I'll just show both props so you can kind of see them and see what you think. But we're almost done. Gentle squeezing, tucking, hitting with the tweezers, all those things, and then ever so slowly kind of pushing the two pieces together towards the hub, towards the center. And if you kind of grab it and push everything together, you can see ever so slowly it's becoming something that sort of looks like an open circle. And then the rest became kind of hard to show in terms of video. And what I ended up doing was cutting a couple of hubs and gluing them in there. At one point, I put that propeller onto a brush handle that was round, just to try to make sure I had a round opening, rounder than what you see there. But that's 3/4 of the way done. So here it is finished. So here is that weird one. And the biggest problem with it is, other than being out of focus, is that the hub is too big. It looks funny on the Migport. This is the one that came with the kit, and I'm not sure which one I want to use. This one seems, I can repaint the actual blades and make them look better. But I do like how this bottom one twists and how it looks like a real propeller. But I'm not sure how it's going to look actually on the machine. So I want to hear what people think. I might even just try to do it one more time, see if I can get it better. But those are my two propellers to choose from.